The glass tower of Baekdu Holdings rose 43 stories above downtown Seoul, all steel and reflection, the kind of building that didn't just house wealth, it announced it. Outside, standing in the shadow of that tower, was a man who owned nothing. Marcus Carter had been standing there for 7 minutes, smoothing down a blazer that didn't belong to him. He had borrowed it from a neighbor the night before, because the only blazer he owned had a coffee stain on the sleeve that no amount of scrubbing could fix. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He already knew what it was without looking. A second notice from his daughter's school reminding him that this month's tuition balance was still outstanding. He silenced it and took a breath. For years had passed since he buried his wife, Sarah. For years of driving for a ride-hailing app, picking up odd security shifts here and there, doing whatever it took to keep a roof over his daughter's head in a city that was never supposed to be permanent. This was supposed to be temporary, too. Just another interview that probably wouldn't go anywhere. But the pay listed for this position was more than double what he made in a month right now. And Mia needed new shoes before winter. So he walked through the front doors and gave his name to the front desk. The waiting room was full of men in suits that actually fit, tailored, expensive. The kind of men who looked like driving a billionaire around was simply the first rung on a much longer ladder they planned to climb. They glanced at Marcus once, decided he wasn't competition, and went back to their phones. Marcus didn't mind being underestimated. He had built an entire career on it. A woman in a sharp navy suit eventually called his name and led him down a hallway to an underground vehicle bay. Waiting there was a woman with cropped silver hair and the stillness of someone who had spent decades reading people for a living. She introduced herself simply as Director Choi, head of security for the Kang family. She gestured toward a black sedan parked under fluorescent lights. "Standard procedure," she said. "Open the rear door, seat the principal, confirm the route, and we are done. 5 minutes, maybe less." Marcus didn't move toward the door. Instead, he walked the length of the car first. Choi's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Is there a problem?" "Not yet," Marcus said. "I'm checking if there is one." He crouched at the rear tire, ran his fingers along the seam where the trunk met the bumper, and then opened the trunk to check the spare. It took him under 2 minutes. When he stood back up, he had his answer. "This run flat insert expired 11 months ago," he said. "If that tire blows on the highway at speed, whoever is riding in this car does not have a backup plan. I'm not getting in until that's fixed." Choi studied him for a long moment. Behind her, a younger staff member shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed that 2 years of routine inspections had missed something this basic. "We've had 4 interviews today," Choi said slowly. "You're the first person who has touched the trunk." Marcus shrugged. "I've learned that the parts nobody checks are usually the parts that put someone in real danger." That was when the elevator doors opened behind them, and a woman in a charcoal pantsuit stepped into the vehicle bay, phone in hand, clearly in the middle of 3 conversations at once. She didn't look like what Marcus expected from a billionaire heiress. No flashy jewelry, no entourage trailing behind her, just quiet exhaustion in her eyes, like a woman who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Kang Jun-hee ended her call and looked at the small gathering around the sedan. "Why is there a delay?" she asked. "I have a meeting in 11 minutes. Choi opened her mouth to explain, but Marcus answered first. "Because the spare tire in this vehicle is unsafe, and I'm not driving anyone anywhere until it's replaced. If you want to be on time today, that's the fastest way to make it happen." Jun-hee blinked. Nobody on her staff spoke to him quite like that, flat and direct, no apology stitched into the sentence. "You always slow things down like this?" she asked, somewhere between irritation and curiosity. "Only when the schedule is moving faster than the safety margin can survive," Marcus said. There was a pause. Then, for the first time that morning, Jun-hee almost smiled. "Fix the tire," she told Choi. Then she turned and walked back toward the elevator without another word. By the end of that day, Marcus had the job. He still remembered calling his daughter's school from the parking garage that same afternoon, telling them the overdue balance would be cleared by the end of the week. He remembered Mia's voice on the other end of the phone when he picked her up later that day, asking if this meant he could finally stop checking his banking app every 5 minutes. He told her yes. He hoped it was true. What he didn't know yet was that this job wasn't going to be about checking tire pressure and confirming routes. It was about to pull him back into a world he thought he had left behind for good, the moment he handed in his uniform 4 years ago. The first 2 weeks were almost peaceful. Marcus learned the rhythms of Jun-hee's world quietly, the way he used to learn the layout of a building before a mission, without ever announcing that he was paying attention. He noticed which executives lingered at pickup, hoping for 30 seconds of face time. He noticed how often Jun-hee's uncle, Kang Jun-hee, scheduled meetings during the exact hours Jun-hee was supposed to be unreachable, always with the tight, overcorrected politeness of a man trying not to let anyone see how much pressure he was actually under. He noticed Director Choi's deputy, CO Kang Min, adjusting the parking garage cameras more often than maintenance required, his hands a little too quick, like a man checking his own work twice because he was afraid of what might happen if he didn't. Marcus said nothing. Not yet. A man with a sealed service record learns early that staying quiet keeps you employed. Jun-hee noticed things about Marcus, too. He never asked for a bonus, never traded gossip with the other staff, never tried to make himself memorable through charm. He simply did the job better than anyone before him and went home. One afternoon, waiting in the underground garage, Jun-hee overheard part of a phone call he wasn't meant to hear. "I know the payment's late," Marcus was saying, his voice low and careful. "It'll be cleared by Friday, I promise. She's a good kid. She just needs new shoes before the cold gets bad." Marcus caught Jun-hee's eyes briefly in the mirror afterward and said nothing. Jun-hee said nothing either, but she filed it away, the same patient way Marcus filed away everything he noticed about her. It was a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks into the job, when Marcus first noticed the sedan parked across from Baekdu Tower after a late board dinner. Nothing unusual on its own, except he had seen the same car that morning outside a private breakfast meeting on the other side of the city. Same cracked side mirror, same driver sitting just a little too still behind the wheel. Once is nothing, he told himself. Twice is worth remembering. 3 days later, the same sedan turned up outside a private club in a completely different part of the city, and 3 times stopped being a coincidence. He logged everything that night, timestamps, locations, the partial plate number, and brought it to Director Choi the next morning. Choi read through his notes with the kind of polite patience reserved for someone she didn't quite believe yet. "Executives like Ms. Kang attract this kind of attention constantly," she said. "Competitors, journalists. It rarely means anything." The plate came back registered to a rental company. No flags. Thousands of vehicles like it moved through Seoul every day. Marcus thanked her and said nothing else. But that night he made a decision on his own. The next morning, without telling anyone in advance, Marcus rerouted Jun-hee's 9 o'clock meeting, taking a longer path nobody on staff would have predicted. The sedan was waiting at the alternate exit anyway. There was only one way that was possible. Someone with access to the route information had passed it along. Marcus told Jun-hee directly that afternoon, stopped at a red light with the sedan 3 cars back in the mirror, delivered the same way he'd give a status report, not a warning meant to scare her. "That car has followed us 3 times this week, on 3 different routes, including one I changed without telling anyone," he said. "I don't think that's a coincidence anymore." Jun-hee was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus in the mirror. "What do you need to find out for certain?" she finally asked. "I need to check the car myself tonight without anyone on staff knowing in advance. If there's a way they've been tracking our location, I'll find it." Jun-hee didn't ask why Marcus suddenly sounded less like a driver and more like someone trained for exactly this kind of work. She simply nodded. "Do it." That night, in the lower level of the parking garage, Marcus worked beneath the limousine with a small magnetic detector he had purchased that afternoon. 22 minutes in, his hand brushed against something that didn't belong. A small sealed unit mounted just above the rear axle, transmitting quietly on a frequency that had nothing to do with the vehicle's factory systems. He held it up under the garage lights and felt something cold settle in his chest, the particular, familiar feeling of confirming a threat he had hoped was nothing. When he brought it to Director Choi, her expression changed for the first time since Marcus had met her. "This wasn't placed by accident," Choi said quietly, turning the device over in her gloved hands. "Whoever did this had access to this garage, bay access, which means it's someone on staff." Neither of them said a name out loud. Not yet, but they both already had a short list, and Choi's deputy, CO Kangmin, was on it. It was Choi, in fact, who finally found out the truth about who Marcus really was. Standard procedure, she told herself, running a deeper background check on anyone this capable working this close to the family. What came back stopped her cold. 11 years in naval special warfare. Multiple classified deployments. An honorable discharge Marcus had requested himself, after declining a reenlistment that would have meant another full year away from a newly widowed household. She brought the file to Jun-hee without comment, set it on the desk, and left the room. Jun-hee found Marcus later that evening, waiting by the car, and asked him about it directly, the way she asked about everything, without dressing the question up in anything softer than it needed to be. "You were a Navy SEAL," she said. It wasn't really a question. Marcus met her eyes and didn't flinch. "I was," he said. "It wasn't relevant to the job, so I didn't bring it up. I listed it on the application because leaving it off entirely would have been a lie. There's a difference. Could you protect me if it ever came to that?" Jun-hee asked. "Having the capacity and having the authorization to use it are two very different things," Marcus said. "You already have a security team for that. I'm your driver." Jun-hee studied him for a moment longer than necessary. "Then why does it feel like you're the only person in this building who actually noticed something was wrong before it became a problem?" Marcus didn't have a good answer for that, so he told her the truth instead. "My wife was a federal investigator," he said quietly. "She worked smuggling cases for years, including one that never closed, before she didn't come home from it. I was on deployment when it happened. I came home to a funeral and a daughter who barely recognized my voice on the phone. I decided that day I wasn't going to be someone who only came home sometimes anymore." Jun-hee didn't say anything right away. For a woman who ran one of the largest companies in the country, she seemed to understand in that moment that some silences are more respectful than words. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "I'm not telling you this, so you'll feel sorry for me," Marcus said. "I'm telling you because you asked a direct question, and you deserve a direct answer." Jun-hee nodded slowly. Something in the air between them shifted, quiet and unspoken. The kind of trust that doesn't announce itself with a handshake.